Red Bull is panicking after McLaren's dominant win. The drivers are set to discuss their issues with the FIA, and Logan is back in a race car. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff believes his Red Bull Formula One rival Christian Horner is just stirring shit up by name-checking George Russell as a future Red Bull option. Red Bull's long-term driver lineup has been one of the main conversation topics over the Singapore weekend, with Daniel Ricciardo expected to be replaced ahead of Austin's US Grand Prix by reserve driver Liam Lawson at Red Bull's satellite RB team. The widely anticipated move is part of Red Bull trying to get itself in the best possible position for 2026, with Lawson considered a potential future teammate to Max Verstappen, unlike the veteran Australian. Red Bull's conveyor belt of young driver talent faces an apparent midterm hole, with F2 drivers Isaac Hadjar and Ayumu Iwasa all some years away from being bona fide main team candidates, while despite his consistent performances for RB Yuki Tsunoda has yet to win over Horner as a potential F1 frontrunner. It led to Horner cheekily suggesting on TV that Red Bull might be looking at other teams to find its next driver as a long-term Sergio Perez replacement, name-checking Mercedes' Russell as a potential hire. "Look, we're not afraid to go out of the pool," Horner told Sky Sports. "George Russell is out of contract at the end of next year. It would be foolish not to take that into consideration. There are other drivers, talented drivers, that will be out of contract as well." His counterpart Wolff swiftly brushed aside Horner's suggestion that Russell is available, dismissing the comments as his longtime rival playing games in the media. "I think he is always stirring shut up, it is part of the game," Wolff reposted. "George is a Mercedes driver and has been forever and hopefully will be forever. We have a long contract with him." Russell signed a 2-year extension with Mercedes last summer, taking him and the Silver Arrows to the end of the 2025 season. But when Wolff announced Andrea Kimi Antonelli as Hamilton's replacement in Monza, he suggested there are various options and clauses in Russell's contract to tie him to the mark for years to come. "These two are the future," Wolff said about Russell and Antonelli. "They have been and will be Mercedes drivers, and therefore we have contracts with George and Kimi that go much longer, that are very complicated in terms of options, etc. Mercedes has always been a pressure cooker, but this is where we stand as a team today. We want to go with these two." Max Verstappen's rift with the FIA over their decision to hand him a community service sanction for swearing is poised to fizzle out. The Formula One world champion was left upset at the Singapore Grand Prix when he was summoned to the stewards for saying his car was fucked in the previous race in Baku. His comment, made during a live TV broadcast, drew the wrath of the FIA, who issued him with a community service penalty, the details of which are yet to be determined. Verstappen said he posted his punishment in the Grand Prix Drivers Association WhatsApp group, declaring that everyone was almost laughing, like, what the hell is that? However, with F1 now set for an unusually break, with no races until the United States Grand Prix in Austin on October 21st, the 3-time world champion says he will be taking a break from it all. In Singapore, when he was asked post-race if he would continue putting on his own press conferences, as well as the stipulated FIA one, he said, let's first take a break from it all, from F1 also in 2 weeks. At least 2 weeks, and go at it again in Austin. See where we're at." Pressed for comment on his community service, he added, "At the moment, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just focused on the performance, what we are going to do for Austin and beyond. That's what I'm thinking about, and for me, I shouldn't waste any energy on it actually, because it's just very silly." Meanwhile, Red Bull boss Christian Horner said he felt the situation surrounding the penalty application could have been managed better. Horner, who was also forced to do FIA community service in the form of an online conference after commenting on a rogue marshal waving a yellow flag and disrupting Verstappen in qualifying for the Qatar GP in 2021, said, "I think that Max has made his feelings clear on it. Of course, all these drivers are role models, but language that's used in everyday life. I think it would have been perhaps better dealt with slightly differently, which would have avoided any awkwardness." I'm not sure how much he's talking in the FIA press conference now, but I assume it's relatively little. The FIA has been approached for comment from President Mohammed bin Sulayem, who had exclusively told Autosport of his desire to reduce the amount of swearing from F1 drivers ahead of the Singapore GP weekend. Helmut Marko has described Lando Norris's pace as crazy and said Red Bull have an alarming deficit they need to overhaul. Norris finished 20 seconds clear of P2 Max Verstappen in another blow to Red Bull's bid to retain the constructors, and Marco believes the team have to use this break period efficiently if they have any hope of catching up. The 2024 F1 season is unusual in that there is a second break from now until Austin, but unlike the summer shutdown, teams are free to work on their cars in the upcoming weeks. For Red Bull, that is more crucial than most as they look to fight back in their losing constructors title fight. "It's crazy how Norris has pulled away," Marco told OE24. "Our deficit is alarming. We urgently need performance. Thank God we now have 4 weeks to work on it. There should be a lot to come." Team principal and CEO Christian Horner spoke in similar terms, saying there will be a lot of late nights at their factory in Milton Keynes. "McLaren is the benchmark car at the moment and we have a bit to catch up," Horner said, "but we've got the people and the capability to do that. I think that we're going to fight all the way to the end of the championship. We're 52 points ahead in the drivers, with 6 races to go with a lot of races, a lot of points on the board. So there's a lot of racing still to happen. We're certainly going to fight hard through the next triple header and then the final trip header after that." Red Bull have lost big points to McLaren in the last 4 races, with Norris also outscoring Verstappen by 27 points. Alex Albon has backtracked on his angry radio message at the start of Formula One's Singapore Grand Prix after teammate Franco Colapinto's first corner antics. Albon spoke out on the team radio after the opening turns, as he felt that his teammate had made a lunge down the inside of everyone too late into the braking zone. "Franco just dive-bombed," said an exacerbated Albon at the time. "What's he doing?" But after viewing video footage of the opening corner, where a late braking maneuver got Colapinto past Yuki Tsunoda, Carlos Sainz and Albon to move up 3 places from his grid slot, a fresh perspective on how things played out was offered, and Albon, who was forced wide and lost places to fall to 15th, believed that the problem was more about cars all running out of room to turn in than anything his teammate had done. "I don't know how it looked on the outside, but I think it was more just that no one could turn into the corner," explained Albon. "So, everyone concertinaed and basically had to go straight at turn 1. I was on the outside and I paid the price by having to take to the runoff. I mean, nothing really to criticize. It was just a bit unfortunate I was the one on the other side of the corner. It was a bit frustrating, but I think the whole weekend has been a bit frustrating. Having a car that should have been top 10 and we haven't got that." Colapinto himself said he did not see what the fuss was about with his first corner move, as he says he hit the apex and did not force anyone wide. Asked about Albon's dive bomb criticism, the Argentinian said, "I don't know, I only saw Tsunoda next to me. There was a space and I went inside in the corner. There was no one on my right and I left space on the right to the white line, and there was no one there. So, I don't know. I didn't see the replay yet." Albon ultimately retired from the race with a cooling problem, while Colapinto came home in 11th place after feeling that a better strategy call on a day, the undercut proved key to track position, could have helped him finish ahead of Red Bull's Sergio Perez. "I just think that we need to defend that a little bit better and not let these mistakes happen again," added Colapinto, "because just by stopping a lap too late, we lost the place in the points. But it is what it is. We win and we lose together." While Albon played down the first corner moment after the race, Ferrari's Carlos Sainz was not happy with what happened. Speaking to Spanish channel DAZN, he said, "For starting on the dirty side, I didn't get a bad start. I think I got off relatively well. But then breaking into turn 1, I obviously had to watch out for Charles Leclerc in front, and then a Williams came up the inside, braking very late. I think it was Franco who almost took 2 or 3 of us out in front. Nothing. Absolutely nothing happened. There was no accident, but when you are fighting for the Constructors' Championship with the team, you have to be a bit more careful with cars that have less to lose and that have their lives at stake at the start. When you are playing for so many points with the team, you have to be more careful." Formula One drivers are planning discussions about how best to respond to their unease about the FIA's hardline response to Max Verstappen swearing in a press conference. The FIA's decision to impose a day's public service punishment on Verstappen for saying "Afai" ahead of the Singapore Grand Prix has not gone down well with the series' current stars. It even prompted the Dutchman himself to stage protests at subsequent official press conference appearances, offering only short answers to fulfill the requirements of the regulations. On Sunday night, during a privately arranged gathering to speak to media outside the formal FIA setting, Verstappen revealed that what had happened over the weekend could help push him towards quitting F1. But Verstappen is not alone in being unhappy about the matter, and said he had been backed by other drivers in their private Grand Prix Drivers Association, GPDA, WhatsApp group. Asked if there was support for him, Verstappen said, "Yeah, for sure. Of course I wrote in the GPDA chat the ruling, and everyone was almost laughing like, what the hell is that, basically? So, yeah, it is very, very silly." Now, it has emerged that the GPDA wants to gather the thoughts of all of its members and work out a response. Speaking to the YouTube channel of Autosport sister site Formel1.d, GPDA chairman Alex Wirtz said that while not everyone's style may be to use expletives, the issuing of penalties for swearing was excessive. "How many lifetime community services would Guenther Steiner have to serve for using the F word?" said Wirtz, who also tweeted about the topic. He was glorified for using the F word. Netflix broadcast this worldwide, no problem, but then to suddenly change like that? The choice of words is not my personal taste as a driver. As GPDA chairman, I have to officially say that we will, of course, discuss it internally, first reach a full consensus, and then we will consider whether and in what form we will talk to the FIA and the president. Wirtz said it was not the style of the GPDA to use the media to push its agenda, and expressed his hopes that the issue could be resolved behind closed doors to keep all parties happy. "Personally, I always believe, and we also do this at the GPDA, we solve it internally," he said. "We don't go through the media."
Very rarely does something go from the GPDA to the media because we simply try to solve things internally for the sake of the sport and want to bring the people and the individual key stakeholders on our journey together.
I think drivers have to be allowed to express themselves authentically to some extent. Of course, it shouldn't be personally offensive, and it shouldn't be discriminatory either. They've all come a long way in that regard. So, for me personally, the penalty is too severe. The Verstappen controversy came in the wake of remarks that FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem made to Autosport about his desire to see drivers swear less on team radio. "We have to differentiate between our sport, motorsport, and rap music," Ben Sulayem said. "We're not rappers, you know. They say the F word how many times per minute? We are not on that. That's them and we are us." Martin Brundle said McLaren's rear wing was genius if a little cheaty, after they agreed to not use it again and avoid the risk of the FIA stepping in. McLaren's rivals were up in arms after video emerged of Oscar Piastri's rear wing opening despite not using DRS, and after more complaints of it being illegal, McLaren opted to inform the FIA they would not be using it again. McLaren's rivals will say that the damage is already down with the Woking team not needing a wing like that again until Las Vegas, but Brundle has praised the minds behind it for finding the perfect gray area. "I think they know that if they bring it again, they might be in trouble," Brundle said on Sky Sports. "I thought it was genius, to be honest, bit cheaty as well. But a cornerstone, a foundation of Formula One, is the teams must fundamentally make their own car, and they all set about finding ways to bend the regulations and get away with it, if you like. Some of the other teams and drivers complaining is pot, kettle, and black that springs to mind, and also, I think McLaren have some pretty juicy upgrades coming as well. And I'm sure they're thinking we don't need to take any risk with that, the rear wing. We've had the benefit of that. We'll move on to something else now." As Brundle suggested, McLaren are not the first team in F1 history to come as close as possible to the line without breaking the rules, and the former Tyrrell driver said F1 is about innovation. "It's Formula One at its best," he said. "It's just driving innovation, trying to maximize the absolute most of the regulations, sometimes dipping into those gray areas. I think maybe they felt like they were flying a bit close to the wind, and that's why they're taking it off, but I think it's pretty cool." Nico Rosberg, who was alongside Brundle on the broadcast, said that regulating aspects like this is an impossible task for the FIA. "It's very hard to regulate because wings will always be moving and just how much is okay," the 2016 world champion said. "And that's why certainly the teams are flat out in trying to maximize that as much as possible, and McLaren just went a step too far. And now we'll see on the front wings what's going to be happening there, if the FIA is going to crack down there with someone in the pit lane." Logan Sargeant will get behind the wheel for the first time since his Williams exit after being given a test drive in IndyCar. The American will return to his homeland to test for the Meyer-Shank Racing team, who will be assessing him for a possible seat in the future. Despite hailing from Florida, Sargeant has done minimal driving in the US, having moved to Europe at a young age, but having been dropped from Williams, a move to IndyCar may well be his next destination. His first test will come on November 19th as he drives around the Thermal Club in California, a currently private track that will become an official event next season. Meyer-Shank Racing, whose lead driver Felix Rosenqvist finished 12th this season, told Racer they will use the test as a final evaluation day, with Sargent driving the 17-turn, 3.067-mile circuit. It is not the first time Sargent has been linked with IndyCar. In July, Prema revealed they had been speaking with the 23-year-old ahead of their arrival into the sport in 2025. Sargent at the time said he was focused on his F1 drive, but was exploring alternative options. "I'm focusing on my job, making the most of what I have underneath me," he said. "I'm exploring all options within and outside of F1 at the moment. Options are open. I've been hearing speculation for 18 months. I ultimately know what's going on behind the scenes, and in the end, I feel I've been driving really well. My goal is to keep doing that." Sargent's absence has not been felt by Williams as substitute Franco Colapinto continues to impress in his early F1 career. The Argentinian produced an excellent move at the start of the Singapore Grand Prix, but finished just one spot out of the points. "It's a pity we didn't finish in the top 10 after being there at the beginning of the race," Colapinto said. "I think it was possible to stay in the points and keep Sergio Perez behind, with it being a difficult track to overtake. However, we didn't defend as well as we could have, and by stopping a lap too late, we lost a place. It is what it is, and we win and lose together as a team. Tire management was good throughout the race, but I was struggling a bit physically, which was more of a limiting factor. Overall, P11 was still a decent result, and it was a very positive race to build on what I've learned so far." Zach Brown said he and Christian Horner made peace on their flight home from Singapore, and there was not a single Netflix camera in sight. Brown and Horner have not been the best of friends this year, with the McLaren man suggesting previously he has no intentions of talking to his Red Bull counterpart, but whatever ill will there may have been, that appears to have been swept under the rug. You would have to go back to Silverstone for the first real sign that Brown had a personal issue with Horner after the driver collided in Austria, with Brown saying, "I don't really have any interest in speaking with Christian." Following the event in Singapore, where a Red Bull-owned team not called Red Bull made a strategic move that benefited Red Bull, it would have been easy to assume that Brown, the most vocal opponent of multi-team ownership, would have had further issue with this. And while that still may be the case, the personal animosity has been settled for the time being. "Peace in F1 has been restored on flight home," Brown tweeted, alongside an image of him and Horner in matching pajamas. "Where's Netflix when you need them? But the battle will continue on track. What an awesome sport." That battle took another step towards McLaren this weekend, with the team extending their gap at the top by 21 points. But while the constructors is in their favor, Lando Norris still has work to do to overhaul the 52-point gap to Max Verstappen. Team principal Andrea Stella said the team must try and have both cars finish ahead of Verstappen on every race weekend. "We need to recognize that if we maximize the potential of the car now, we finish with 2 cars ahead of Max," he said. "It's possible, and that's what makes us optimistic. Reality is that as soon as you start the weekend, you are into the groove of a weekend, and there's difficulties in a weekend. Like, there's the touch in the walls, there's so many things that you need to keep in control to actually deliver in a race weekend, that the numerical exercise is only valid, I think, when you are away from weekends. I think as soon as you are in a weekend, just full focus, maximize the potential." That is it for today's video. I'll see you around.